South African population for over 350 years. These are people who have been told what to do. They were packed in Bantustans. They don't have the capacity even to think for themselves. They get the other Africans coming in there and very quickly transforming themselves. They are not even able to learn from that, because that's what is supposed to happen. So punitive measures won't help. What may assist is even more integration. And then weighing heavily on the South African government also to take integration measures to educate their citizens on the fact that they need to take life in their own hands and better their own lives, that the foreigners are not taking anything away from them, because competition is for the competent. Mm-hmm. So they need to learn how to compete with the other Africans who come to their countries.
But how do they do that when they constantly feel disadvantaged?
The government need to take that seriously. Like the Kenyan government started the national cohesion and integration actually to educate the Kenyans that we don't live in isolation, that we don't live in many countries, that sometimes we vote separately but we suffer together when the taxes come and so on. So the idea here is to let these South Africans know that they need the skilled labor force that is acquired from other countries. They need investments, money coming in, which has to come from other countries, and that if they are miserable, it's not their neighbors who are causing the misery, it's the lack of employment, which is the responsibility of the South African government, and the lack of opportunities, which is also the responsibility of South African government to create those opportunities. So the South African government needs seriously to take the cohesion and the national integration of South Africans very serious, because right now they don't look to be doing that, because when you see that mob as a leader, we don't hear that the leader of that mob has been arrested. We are not told, and we don't know that the people actually committing these crimes have been arrested, because we don't know how many, because there have been many, and there have been murders, and we expect that in government. The professor says it's the most police state in the African continent to be on top of things. It does not appear to be on top of things because I think the leadership in South Africa is complacent. We need to weigh heavily on them. I don't think extreme measures will help, because we can't isolate them. They have been isolated for another 300 years. Isolating them further is not going to produce the result which we want. We want them to grow up. We want them to become like us. We want them to appreciate that when other people come to your country, they come to add value, not to remove value. We want them to know that we cannot educate them if we isolate them.
All right. I want to now get the closing remarks as we wrap it up. Professor Kodiaga, we know that South Africa's biggest problem is not the black foreigners. A huge chunk of the economy is controlled by white people. How then do we start to break this down?
Thank you very much. Kisa, you know, the reason why I'm proposing punitive measures is that I've been in this studio before and we've been talking about xenophobia. And you remember why I would humbly take a point of departure from Professor Gitile is that with every case of xenophobic attack, there has been very bad statements coming from the leadership of South African government. Much more recently, it was Ramaphosa who actually accused Africans of non-South African descent for having been responsible for a lot of crimes in that country. Two, the same Lindiwe Sisulu is on record having accused the Somali businessmen and other African businessmen that they should not expect to be treated well in South Africa if they do not teach the native South Africans their style of doing business. Don't forget that Zuma, during his time, also regretted the killings but accused the other Africans in South Africa for having that they should not have been there in the first place. So for that very reason, there can be no good reason for treating South Africa with kid gloves anymore. I do therefore propose, and I repeat, that action must be taken against the South African government, the South African interests, wherever they are in Africa, by the African Union and by individual African countries, because that kind of butchering has not been seen anywhere in the world. When you see them dancing and putting a tie on somebody's neck and stoning, you know, it has never been seen anywhere, and it should not be condoned. So these are people who should be locked in their country, let them stay there, let the other Africans move on until such a time that they're ready to play together with the others. Going forward.
Oh, okay, quickly.
Going forward, I think we need to really re-examine the whole concept of this international relations within the African perspective.
Okay.
We really need to prosecute it further and to really see whether, as a union, the African Union is actually addressing the issue of integration, which Professor Gitile has addressed quite eloquently.
Mr. Mavinga, your closing remarks, please.
South Africa needs to observe the rule of law. It needs to ensure effective policing, thorough investigations, and accountability for the perpetrators. The impunity that currently prevails is what is fueling these cycles of xenophobia, and this must stop.
Thank you very much. And we wrap it up with you, Professor Gitile. Your closing remarks. How do we start breaking this cycle down? Yeah,
the South African government has an obligation to protect all individuals within the borders of South Africa, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their race, regardless of color. And that obligation is solely, that responsibility is the South African government. They took too long, the South African president took too long even to condemn this incident. And I think that needs to come very clear from the other African leaders to tell them you have a responsibility, take your responsibility seriously. Because the people doing that, like I said, I will be careful to condemn the entire South African population. I will be careful. These are few people. These few people need to be apprehended, they need to be punished, and then South Africa need to figure out how they can address the issue of poverty in that country. It's huge. The stress levels are simply too high. They need to figure out to address their internal problem. It is the internal problem that is creating what is now seems to be an external problem. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Just try and understand this issue on the attacks that are happening in South Africa. Deo Mavinga is from the Human Rights Watch in South Africa, joining us by way of Skype from the UK. Thank you very much. We appreciate your presence on the show tonight. Mifika Mwenda spoke to us on phone, a Kenyan living in South Africa, just painting a picture for us. Professor Israel Kodiaga is a specialist consultant on Africa's political, socio-economic and security landscape at the Southern Delta International, as well as Professor Gitile Naituli, former Commissioner, National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Sophia Anuna spoke to George Morara from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is